Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I am your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated, joined by my fellow Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated, the great Ezekiel Trezevant, and you're listening to the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. We're so glad to have you with us. Zeke, I want to dig in. You were there with an energetic Antonio Pierce on Wednesday, Scott Turner, Patrick Graham today. Let's go through it. And then we'll get into the locker room next. But let's start with AP. That's a guy that seems rejuvenated to me.
Yeah, he came in. The words he uses is the juice, right? And obviously AP always kind of has a little bit of juice to him, but it was different, obviously, with him walking in after the bye week. Kind of reminded me of his very first game as the coach and kind of the juice he brought after they needed some basically. So it was good to see him in good spirits. Even though everything that's been going on, but he seems like he's ready to go. I think the one thing I took from AP was that he kept a pretty level head about it all, right? Even after the coaching changes, he's not coming in promising the world, right? He's keeping it very honest, keeping it very real. Like, hey, it's going to take some time, but they just want to look better, right? He's not guaranteeing wins, but he just wants to look better, and I think that should happen.
You and I both like and respect Antonio Pierce. I consider him a friend, and I don't think it in any way shadows our coverage. But I think a lot of coaches could learn from him. He keeps it real all the time, and there isn't ever any coach speak. I know he gets some criticism for that, and that just blows my mind. The only people that I think would accuse him of coach speak are people that haven't sat in coaches' press conferences. I like him personally, but I like the way he handles. He's, as you would say, he keeps it 100.
Yeah, so the one thing I'll say about that in terms of AP is that does he give some coach speak? Yes, but it's minimal compared to the previous coach and other coaches out there that have been that you sit in pressers on. So he gives you a little bit of coach speak. And what I've had to learn from doing this is that sometimes coach speak is necessary, right? Sometimes that's just part of their job is to give you the coach speak. But AP keeps it as real as he can. And what I've also noticed is if he ever has to give you the coach speak, usually the next question you ask, he's going to elaborate a little bit longer on it because he knows he gave you coach speak, before. So, he's pretty good when it comes to that.
Don't you agree, though? A lot of coaches could learn from him.
Yes, a lot of coaches could be more forthcoming without giving away the details that they don't want to give away that we as the media are not asking them to.
I think a lot of coaches would get a lot more respect and maybe patience from fans if they did that. I think when a coach goes silent or a coach goes coach speak, that sends fans through the roof, and ultimately they are the boss.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, from somebody on the outside looking in, like a fan would appreciate being a little bit more honest. Again, we understand you can't come out and say the most honest thing that came to your mind. We understand using a filter, but you can be a little bit more honest than most coaches are. And you hit it right on the head. Patience, right? I think that's part of why, on top of everything else that's wrong with this team, I think that's part of why AP is getting the patience he's gotten is because at no point did AP ever come in and say we're going to go to the Super Bowl, we're going to have a 11-win season. He's always been pretty middle of the road about expectations.
Scott Turner has a lot of experience. A lot of people thought he would get OC when Bo Hardegree got it. A lot of people thought he had a shot at being OC when Getsy got it. Uh, to me, very ethereal is how I took the press conference today. Um, very almost like, yeah, okay, I'm here. What's the big deal? Let's go. But you could tell he was Norv Turner's kid. And you were sitting right there a few feet from him in the building. Your thoughts?
Yeah, energetic was definitely the right word. And I told you, privately, I felt like he was locked in, right? And you put it in a different way, but that is kind of how it was. Like, hey, I'm here, no big deal. I'm ready. This is, almost like this was supposed to happen to a certain degree. Like this is his chance, right, to go do it again. So it seemed to me, like he was in an offensive meeting and he took some time away to come talk to us, right? And he kind of just wanted to kind of get back to it. That was the vibe that I got, was that we took him out of scheming and game planning, literally right out of the meeting, and he came and talked to us, and he just wanted to kind of get back to it. So, but he took a long time with us. I think Scott talked to us for upwards of 15 minutes, which that's a pretty long time in what we do. So it was great to hear from him and hear a different point of view. But again, I think all eyes are on how does the offense look come Sunday.
Let's turn to Patrick Graham. This is a guy who's defense, hasn't got a lot of help from the offense. It's been battered with major, massive injuries at every level. When you look at Christian, then you turn around and you look at Marcus Epps. I mean, I'm missing somebody. Help me. Oh,
Kuntz.
Kuntz. I mean, you look at, just injuries.
Yeah, yeah.
And this guy has done an under the radar job, but as usual, a good job. What was your perception of Patrick?
I like the fact that Patrick, to my knowledge, he has never once even alluded to an excuse of any kind because of the
Never.
injuries. And in my opinion, there's excuses and then there's legitimate reasons for why something's not going the way that you thought it was going to go. And when you lose your $100 million defensive tackle, when you lose your starting safety, you lose your starting defensive end before, like, go down the line, right? You can, Divine Diablo missed some time, right? Like, you go down the line, they're not just losing pieces that you can easily replace. They're losing their biggest and most important people. And that's already a big deal. But it becomes a bigger deal when you lack the depth that the Raiders lack, right? So we knew going into the season they couldn't afford an injury to most of their defensive starters, right? And here they are with injuries to half their defensive starters, and that's why you get a 2-7 record. So Patrick Graham has a tall task, but it seems like the defense answers the call almost every time you would reasonably expect them to answer it, right? So with that in mind, though, they just gave up a season high in points, so they got to get back on it too. It's not just the offense.
Totally agree. All right, let's talk about the locker room. I think these players are rejuvenated. I think there is a genuine excitement for what can be. They believe in this team. They believe in AP. I think it's fascinating to see it. Your thoughts on the locker room?
Yeah, even being back in there the first day on Wednesday, there was a little bit of more of a pop, right? And I think that was because of the rest. I really do. I think they had some time off. Those guys were ready to be back out there. And again, just like AP is not promising wins, none of the guys in the locker room are promising wins. But I do feel like physically and mentally, they are ready to go attack it, right? And I think the back end of the first half of the season, you can kind of see their energy levels just weren't there. One thing went wrong, and it was just kind of all downhill from there. I think with the time off, I think they're ready to go, and you can definitely tell it in the locker room. Now, I don't think it's as big of a difference as we noticed when AP took over last year. That was a huge difference between the team before and after, but there's definitely a noticeable pop and a noticeable jump in their energy from 2 weeks ago.
I want to talk to you about the decision to stay with Gardner. I think it says a couple things, and I like the decision, by the way. I'm going to make it real clear. I know a lot of people don't. I support it. You don't have Aiden ready yet. I don't think there's a huge excitement in the building for Desmond. Not that he's a bad guy, just the reality, but it shows. Mark Davis, I talked about it last night's podcast, spent the money. He's got 3 guys not in the building anymore, still getting paid. There is we're going to do anything to make this thing work. And I think going with their $25 million quarterback, I think is still a sign they're fighting. Fans don't want them to fight. A lot of them want them to tank. But I think it's a sign that, hey, the franchise isn't tanking. They're still doing everything they can.
Right. I mean, listen, they're even with Gardner, they're not necessarily the best team out there, right? So you might as well put Gardner out there and give yourself a chance. Now, I also think and you know me, Hondo, I personally felt like Desmond should have been named the starter after the bye week, but that was before the offensive coordinator change. So I think to ask Desmond to come in and in 2 weeks deal with another like he's dealing with a different coordinator than the first week he was in here, right? So he's already on his second offensive coordinator, and now you want to go throw him out there in a dire situation behind a makeshift offensive line. It's like that's a you don't want to set people up for disaster, right? And I think that part is probably what goes into it for them. I also think Gardner knows the ins and outs of the offense, right? Whether good, bad, or indifferent, he knows this guy here is going to do X, Y, and Z, or this guy right here can't necessarily do that, right? He knows what works and doesn't work, and that's something that comes from playing with those guys, which Desmond hasn't done yet. So I think between the new offensive coordinator and just being familiar with the goods, the bads, the uglies of the offense, I think that's why Gardner was named the starter again. Well, and I shouldn't even say this. Let me take one step back. Gardner was always the starter, right? Especially once Aiden was out. Gardner was the starter. So there's no need to rename your starting quarterback, right? He was, you swapped out Gardner for Desmond.
He remains the starter.
He remains the starter, right? So it's not like you benched him in that. So he's the starting quarterback. It's time to move on.
I want to talk to you about Michael Mayer. And I was impressed with not the fact that he came back. We've been reporting they expected him back. I was impressed with how he came back, addressed his issue, said, hey, personal issue with me and my family. We're going to handle behind closed doors. I'm impressed with the kid. I know you like him too. Thank God he got it dealt with, but I like him. I know that you like him. He's super talented. And if everything's behind him, I think what this guy could really be is something special. Were you impressed with how he dealt with it?
Listen, listen. I always wish people would admit their biases, and I'm biased on this one. I like Michael Mayer. I've liked him since he was in college. I watched him play in college, and he was a man amongst boys on the college level, right, on the collegiate level. So to see him get to this level, I root for him. I do. Was very impressed with how he handled it, right? None of us like to go in front of 10 cameras that are shooting to the world and say what's going on with our family, right? So I think that he handled it very well. Everybody likes Michael Mayer. Like, there's not a person that can say a bad thing about Michael Mayer. So, there's business and then there's personal, right? And you can't take care of business if home is not right. So Michael handled it correctly. Hopefully, it's as behind him as can be, and he can move forward. But, everybody's happy to have him back in the room, and they are better with him on the field.
I was asked recently how I would describe Mike after I had talked about what you said, everybody liked him. And I said, he's really a lot like Amik Robertson. I don't think Amik had an enemy on the team. Everybody liked him. Everybody appreciated him. I get that same, they're different guys, different personalities, different positions, but I think same type of guy. He's a glue guy and his teammates love him. Do you think I'm overstating that?
No. At his core, Michael is the kind of guy you can go grab a beer with Michael Mayer and you wouldn't know that he played professional football, right? He's a man.
You would grab a Hennessy.
Hey, a Hennessy and ginger ale, or Hennessy or something. Yes, listen, that's my weakness. Don't get me started. But yes, Michael Mayer is a good dude, man. I annoyed Michael Mayer for the first 8 weeks of the season last year when they were trying to get him the ball. I was in Michael Mayer's face every week, and it was good to kind of see him progress and finally, get those catches and get those targets and see him grow. So, good dude. Again, everybody likes to be around Michael, whether you're on the team, coaches, media. Good dude, and it's good to have him back.
In the locker room last year, every time he was available, I knew I could find Zeke at Mayer's locker.
Yeah. Listen, Michael Mayer is the truth. And then last year, the situation, and I wrote about it, it was so perplexing that they traded up to draft him. And then they said, hey, we want to teach him how to block. Well, you're blocking for the worst running game in the league right now. Like, go use them on some pass plays. So, yeah, it was just more so just wanting to see the Raiders play to their full potential with the guy they traded up for, but they're making them block all year. It's like that just didn't make sense. So, glad to see him kind of blossoming.
I agree with you, bud. All right, listen. I want to turn attention because obviously the Raiders are unless some miracle happens, which we both know we both believe in miracles. But barring a miracle, the Raiders are going to be looking for a quarterback next year. And I think they're going to be looking for one in the draft. There are a lot of people that are reading the tea leaves, especially from the Sanders side, thinking this is a done deal. Sanders is coming. Well, there are a lot of things that have to happen for Shedeur to be here. There's still all the evaluations and all of it. I think people who are just assuming, I've had people email me, I've already bought my Sanders jersey. I'm not saying he isn't coming here. In fact, recently I was asked if I had to pick who the Raiders are going to take, who do I think they end up with? I said probably Shedeur. But I think people need to tap the brakes a little bit. It's a long way from being anything to a done deal. Would you not agree with that, or do you think I'm wrong?
On a lot of levels, but let's just start on a very simplistic level. It is November 14th. We got a long way to go. There's so many different things that could happen. I mean, you're talking injuries, you're talking about a lot of different things. Now, the tea leaves are there, right? We can't deny that there are a lot of tea leaves on the situation. But at the same time, there's a lot of different things that, I mean, what if somebody comes and offers the Raiders a trade with picks that they can't deny, right? There's so many different variables that could happen between now and the draft. So it is definitely fun to talk about the possibilities, but we definitely have to slow our horses because you never know what can happen come draft night.
I have not done any evaluating. I haven't talked to the evaluators. Okay. So, I mean, I have, but very limited. So this is not a suggestion they get him, nothing. I get into all that once the Raiders are out of playoff contention. But just simply on a selfish level for you and I, having Shedeur Sanders in that building and Dion's propensity to find any mic that's turned on not be great for our job.
I know. It's funny you said that. I was actually talking to another gentleman in the media room this week about that exact same thing. I said, look, them being 2-7 probably is not the best, but if the Sanders family comes, can you imagine the offseason? The offseason is going to be filled with just, I can't even imagine. So it's going to be very exciting. And like you said, very, very selfishly, okay? I don't want to hide. I'm being selfish on this one, okay? It would be huge. Like that, our offseason would be a good time.
It would be a lot of fun. All right, Zeke, let's talk about something. I mentioned it on last night's podcast. I'm going to mention on this one. Mark Davis goes out paying more people to not be here. AP not willing to just sit on his laurels and worry about his pride. This Raider organization, I know they're 2-7. I know that nobody's happy, and you know that. We're not pretending. But by gosh, there is a lot of pride in this building. And there's a lot of pride that rests in Raider headquarters. And anyone thinking they're tanking is nuts. They're putting all the effort into it. I'm impressed with the fact that they could take the low road and tank. They could have said, well, we're going to see what Desmond does. They could have said, hey, we're going to have Spillane. He was hurt, rest the last of the year. Hey, we're going to let Max get back. Now, they're still fighting, scratching, crawling. I'm sorry, Zeke. I know the fans want to tank, and I love them for it, and I don't have a problem with that. They're thinking long term. But once you let your guys lose, it creates a nightmare, and it shows their pride in what they're doing. I'm impressed with it from Mark Davis on down. I'd love to hear your thoughts because you are a fan. You may think, yes. No, tank.
So I've got a couple of different outlooks on this, but I'll start from the very top with at the end of the day, the Las Vegas Raiders are the Raiders. Whether they're 0-17 or whether they're 17-0, they are the Raiders, right? So there's a certain amount of pride that comes with playing for them, no matter how good they are. And that goes from the top down, and that's what you're seeing. Now, the other half of it is, and I mean this very respectfully, but the roster that they have, especially after the injuries, they don't have to go out there to try to lose. Like, even if this roster plays the best that they can play, they're still probably going to lose. We've watched it all season, right? They're not going out there actively trying to lose, right? So I think that's where the pride comes in, right? If you're going out there actively trying to lose when you don't necessarily need to try to lose, I'm questioning how much you love the game. That's when I have to question your pride in yourself. But even at their best, they're not tailored to win many games, right? So at least go out there and give your best, which is what they're doing. And I think that's all you can ask for, right? And that's what they're going to keep on doing. Now, that might still lead to blowout losses. You might still lose by 10, 20 points, but you can still go out there and again, I said it last time on the podcast, AP keeps on saying he wants it to look right. He wants it to feel right. And what he's trying to say is you can lose and it still look presentable, right? It still looks respectable. And I think that's what they're looking for here. And that goes completely against tanking. So I think, like you said, long-term doesn't make sense for them to lose, but there's a difference between losing because you're not good enough to win and actively trying to lose. I think people need to understand that.
What's your prediction in Miami this week?
Man, listen, if they were healthy, I would probably be like, hey, a 3-point loss, but they're so banged up. And listen, Miami is a tall task with all those receivers they got. And you think, right? You think, oh, I know Miami's offense. No, go talk to those guys in the locker room and ask them how it is guarding, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and all those guys. It's a different game. Basically, all of the things that the Miami Dolphins do well in terms of offense are things that the Raiders defense struggles with, even when healthy, and they're not healthy. So I do think Miami is going to end up winning. Hopefully it's no more than a 7 or a 10-point loss.
All right, buddy. He's the one and only, the great Ezekiel Trezevant. He is, of course, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated with me. Zeke, tell everybody real quick, where can they find you on X?
Yes, sir. My handle is EZ, T as in Tom, REZ as in zebra, _SI. So EZTREZ _SI.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.